Hi, everybody. My name is Dana Nachman. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and last year I made Dear Santa, which was featured at Brand Storytelling. So this year was invited to be on the selection committee, which was so exciting and great. And one of my favorite movies was Morning Joy, and so I'm so thrilled I was asked to moderate this awesome discussion with the filmmakers. I'll start by letting them introduce themselves. We'll start with John Henry.
Hi, I'm John Henry Hinkle. I'm the director and one of the producers on Morning Joy.
I'm Ethan Pakchar. I'm also one of the producers, and I wrote and scored the film.
Oh my God, this film is so good. I mean, beginning to end, it's amazing. The score is like next level, but we can talk about that later. But it's just really my honor to be able to talk about this film with these awesome filmmakers. Everybody should go watch it. It is beautiful, it's emotional, it's relatable, it's so tight and efficient, like at under 8 minutes. It's as perfect of a short as I've ever seen. So congrats to your whole team.
Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. So my first criteria when I was watching all the films was just simply, is it a great film? And then if the answer was yes, I thought about, was the brand incorporated in a seamless way and an organic way? And yours just checked all of those boxes for me. So can you start by telling me about how you conceived the film and about how you came to work with Kawaii on the film?
Yeah, I can take that. So this has been an idea many years in the making. So Ethan and I knew each other in high school. We were very good friends. And probably about 5 years ago, he came to me with the idea of a bird human sort of musical duo. And we had different iterations of this idea. At one point, it was going to be a feature animated film. We had a children's short story. We had all sorts of different versions, but none of them felt quite right. And then sort of right at the start of COVID in 2020, both of us kind of found ourselves with a lot of free time. And we started talking about this idea again and potentially doing it as a short film, and sort of what would the parameters look like for that? What would that human bird relationship look like? And, we just sort of dove in. And once we kind of landed on the idea in this short film, it just all clicked for us. And it was like, this is what we want to pursue. This is sort of, maybe in our opinion, sort of the best iteration that we've come up with. So let's just go head first into it. And I think we wrote it in about a month. And then we started, we found a really talented illustrator named Nathan Matthew, and he created the animatic, which is sort of the rough sketch version of the film. So it's kind of like jerky, sort of stop motion almost. And we used that to kind of determine the length and the timing of everything. We made countless revisions with him. And then once we had an animatic that we really liked, we started sharing it just initially with friends, family, and everyone really had this strong sort of emotional response, even though the visuals were very rudimentary, again, just kind of outlines. So at that point, I think we knew we really had something potentially special, but we also realized quickly in talking with different animation companies in America, just how expensive this endeavor would be. Ethan and I are both sort of scrappy indie artists, so we don't have the money to necessarily do this ourselves. And so we sort of had a conversation together, and we were like, why don't we try to find a brand to partner with and kind of help us cross this finish line? And, we basically reached out to a number of different piano companies, cold emails, and Kawaii was the only one that got back with us and said, oh, we really love this. We'd love to be a part of it. And ultimately, I think for me, Kawaii was in my secret top choice the whole time, not just because they were the only ones that replied, but because, they really stand for innovation. They're one of the first piano companies to create digital pianos. Their sort of motto is the future of the piano. So they're always trying to do innovative things. They're really responsible environmentally and sustainably. So they're just like always looking to the future. And I felt like an innovative company like that, needs innovative branding. And so that was sort of our pitch to them, was like, here's a way to really connect with the ethos of your company. You're innovative, you're championing music, you're championing art, and obviously you're championing pianos. And like that's what our film is doing as well. And we can incorporate your company and your brand in a way that feels organic and doesn't feel forced. Just because the piano is such a big character in the film, it's like we can put your logo on it and it doesn't diminish the story. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like we had a film, and then we had a brand come in and we had to add some scenes to accommodate the brand. We were able to tell the story we wanted to tell and incorporate the brand kind of seamlessly, I think. And ultimately, I think the story at its core speaks to sort of the redemptive power of music, which is aligned with what Kawaii is all about. So it really just felt organic kind of from the start.
100%. Okay, and it totally came off that way, fully. And so I want to, I think you teased a question I have for later about like working with brands and the fact that you cold called them, which is exactly how I reached USPS. I just cold called them one day. And, the fact that certain brands pick up the phone, like really enables us to start these kind of relationships, which is amazing. And we'll talk about that after. But something else you touched on about, the scrappiness, I relate to everything you're talking about, but as independent filmmakers, we are very scrappy people. I think, when we were deliberating over a bunch of the films, people, I sensed that brands were nervous about narrative and animation because of the expense of them. And I think it's really amazing what you pulled off, because when scrappy filmmakers, indie filmmakers can make, I'm a part of Slam Dance Film Festival, which is happening, right now when Sundance happens. And it's about, people make the most amazing things, with Slam Dance and all these really indie places. So we know how to be scrappy, and brands can really tap into that to get so much more bang for their buck than most anything else. So can you speak of how you become, what is, for those who don't know, what is being a scrappy filmmaker like, or composer like, and how like there are ways that you work that probably never even would occur to people who do commercials a lot of the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's obviously a difficult path. I don't think anyone that is an indie filmmaker would say it's very easy. I think what really helped me with this film is just having this partnership with Ethan, because you need someone else that's in the trenches with you. And I think with him, it's like we promised ourselves, like, no matter what, like, we're going to make this. Even though when we first started meeting with companies, they were like, oh, like animation companies, they would say, oh, this is $200,000. And, we don't have that money. But we kept telling ourselves, we'll find a way, we'll find a way. And I think, the internet is a great resource now. So it's like we were able to explore and find artists from around the world to work on this. And also with COVID, a lot of people weren't, they were at home. They weren't necessarily working their day jobs. They had more flexibility. And so we were able to, again, use the strength of the animatic and start sending that to people and say, hey, are you interested in doing some character art for us? Are you interested in doing story art? And we, perhaps it's like naivete, but it's like we just cold emailed big people, small people. And we were shocked that a lot of the times those big people responded. And they responded like, yes, we would love to help you. We have time. This is a great project. And so I would say, I guess for advice, it's just like, take the risk. The worst thing that happens is you just either get a no or you don't get a response. But like, had we not reached out to Kawaii, had we given up after the first couple companies, we wouldn't be here. So you have to just take the shots and, just keep pushing. And there's always a way. There's always like, maybe you have a plan A, but you also should have B, C, D, E. And sometimes E is better than A when it's all said and done. So,
right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say another thing too about like, speaking of being like scrappy, like filmmakers, scrappy musicians, it's like, this is not our full-time job to make an animated short. And so when we're going to do this, and kind of like you said, Dana, it's like our first priority was just to tell a great story. Since this is not our full-time job and this is our passion project, we're going to put like everything into that. And so I think when Kawaii saw that in us, they appreciated that, because it's like we're trying to make something great for us, not even for you, for us. And now that you're on board, now it's for all of us. So I don't know. That's sort of how I feel about that.
I love that. And yeah, I think you hit it so well, both of you, that, us, like when we're making things, this isn't no matter how we make money separately, like we're thinking about this in the middle of the night. We're thinking about our story. We're like, it's a 24/7 thing. And so brands can tap into that. You know, these filmmakers, it is our passion and we're going to make them no matter what. Like there was no way this film wouldn't get made. You could tell by the way it came out, it would have gotten finished no matter what. And so that kind of passion and that kind of like tenacity isn't what you get when, like, I mean, I know when you're doing a commercial or you're doing a corporate video, you know, you hire people for that and, you know, they're clocking in and they're clocking out. When you're doing these kind of indie films, there's none of that sensibility. It's like an all for one thing. And so then it's an awesome thing when you can get a brand in that, you know, as well. So that's great. So Ethan, so first of all, let's just talk about the score for a minute. So it was so beautiful. There's no dialogue. It really guided us through all the beats of it. I love the like crazy jazz part when he's mad and trying to kill the, I don't give anything away. But how did working on this film differ from your work on Broadway? I mean, you have such an amazing slate of things that you do, and all your other work. Why are indie films like this important to composers and just the crews? You know, on the whole, why is it important for people to support this work for all filmmakers and for composers?
Well, I guess I can jump into that by saying like the way that I got into sort of doing any of this professionally, like the first thing that I did professionally was play guitar on different Broadway shows. So that I was sort of a guitarist first, even though I went to school for composition. And I work in musical theater a lot on Broadway. And so I'm very aware of how music can tell a story and just the importance of that. And so when John Henry and I were writing this, I was like, okay, well, one of the first things that we're going to do is we're going to figure out what this song is going to sound like. So I just like started writing for the piano and sending John Henry all these things. And he was giving me notes and we were taking it from there. But I guess when it comes to just music, like you said, it's a silent film and this is a musical story and it's about how music can heal. And so we wanted to highlight that from day one. And so that's what we did, I guess.
Yeah, you really 100% did.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how can I can expand on that. But I mean, it's a silent film and music tells the story. But also, I mean, another thing too, I mean, just in terms of like subtly adding everything tells a story when you're not using one of our most important resources, which is the human voice. So, I mean, even when we're doing something subtle, like looking at the Kawaii logo, like, yes, we're not trying to like blast you with that, but every little detail matters because it's such a subtle film, I guess, at the end of the day. So the small little specks of light, the small little musical cue, the small little Foley cue, it all like kind of comes together at the end. And I can say one more thing about kind of the music. One thing that John Henry and I struggled with a lot was what is the bird going to sound like and how are we going to have a bird sing? Because birds don't actually sound like the way that we have it in the film. And so
was it a piccolo? What
it was close to a piccolo. It's a sopranino recorder. It's one of the tiny recorders. So like when you're in elementary school, that's a soprano recorder. And we used a sopranino recorder, which is like a three-quarters of the size of that. And one thing that's super cool that I'm like super proud of is that we found this incredible recorder virtuoso named Charlotte Barber Condini in London. And we showed her the animatic, which at that time I was just using kind of like digital flutes just as sort of temp. And we sent it to her and she fell in love with it. So we did a session remotely. I was in New York and she was in London, like playing this little piccolo or like, you know, little recorder. And so that was like one of my favorite parts of the whole process.
Oh my God, that's so awesome. Yeah, I mean, I could like hear it in my brain so specifically. Like I think like if I can make that sound, I could hear it like more so than you would hear anything else. It's awesome. So what you were saying about working in London with Charlotte, that actually my next question was about really the international crew. Like that's a pretty awesome story. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like working with a crew all over the world. I mean, the fact that it was during the pandemic is really touching, because everybody's home in their little worlds. But what was that like? I mean, that's pretty rare to be able to work with people all over the world and artists all over the world. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Sure, I can take that. Yeah, I mean, we knew kind of early on it was like we wanted this because it's scrappy. We have to find the right people, and the right person is someone who we can kind of sense their ethos through their work and kind of know they might be open to doing something kind of on the side for extremely cheap, like 10% of their normal rate. And so it was a lot of just sussing out different profiles online. And it just so happened that a lot of the people that we gravitated towards were in other countries. That wasn't necessarily the goal going into it. It was just like, who are the best people we can find? And we found a great character artist in Australia. So he was someone we worked with very early on. And it was kind of like at each point when someone said yes, it just put like more wind in the sails to like keep going and to feel like, okay, this is something that will eventually come to fruition. And also, it makes you more accountable because as you add people, they'll be checking in like, hey, like, what's up with that film? And sometimes that can be stressful, but I also think when you're making something initially for yourself, it's like you kind of need that. You need that accountability that can kind of be, you can turn that into motivation. And so, yeah, we worked with initially an artist in Australia. We worked with artists in France, artists in LA. But what really kind of unlocked this film and really made it possible was that I was in Belgrade in Serbia shooting a different film and had some downtime. And just kind of out of the blue was like, let me see, are there animation companies here in Belgrade? Did a quick search and came across this studio called Tailsgate that really specialized in the 2D sort of hand-drawn style that we wanted for this film. And I was like, this is too good to be true. Like, I have to reach out to these people. And so I just, again, sent a cold email with a link to the animatic being like, we're looking for artists. Like, we need a studio to help us make this. And the head of the studio, Nemanja Gavrilovic, or NG Nash, as he's known here in the States, immediately responded. He was like, I love the animatic. Let's meet up and talk. And again, we sort of just lucked out. It was kind of serendipitous. They had time in their schedule. They were in between bigger projects. And so they were like, we're not really doing anything. We love this animatic. We're interested in getting into the American market. And we get to work with this really cool brand. So for them, it was kind of a no-brainer because it's like you can get, hopefully for them, great exposure while also working on something that's creatively fulfilling because they had done so many commercials in Serbia that really weren't telling stories, like little 30-second spots, 15-second spots, and they were burnt out on that. Like he was like, I don't want to do any more commercials, but he was like, this is a film. Like, yes, there's a brand involved, but it's not this, it's different. So for them, they got on board and, all credit to them because once they got on, they became the engine with us to, get this across.
No, that's amazing. I think that's like what a scrappy filmmaker moving into the brand space might really benefit from is like, everybody started as an artist. A lot of people went to film school or art school or music school. And no matter, you have to sometimes sell your soul to make money or enough money for your family, but everybody wants to come back and do real art, real storytelling. And so I think this is amazing. That's why I think brand storytelling is so cool, is that it marries those worlds and everybody wants to jump on board. When you ask people to work on your projects, it's not hard. So it's great. So what are the next steps for this amazing film? I'm so excited to hear about the path you're planning on going on. Please just tell us.
Ethan, you want to take it?
I guess what we're doing first and foremost is continuing to apply to film festivals because like we've said, like it's not just a brand film, although it is that it's a film as well. And so we're seriously pursuing, some of the bigger festivals out there, and then we'll see what happens. But brand was the first one we applied to and the first one we got into, so it's a great honor for that.
Yeah.
Gage, did you want to expand on that?
Yeah, I mean, shout out to brand storytelling because what inspired me early to try to find a piano partner was seeing that, Aflac had an animated short that premiered in brand storytelling. And when I saw, okay, if this big company like Aflac is going to make a film, again, not a commercial, like a short animated film, I was like, I can use this, like, because there were articles about the Aflac piece, I can use this in my pitch to these brands. So it's not just like, hey, take a chance on us. It's like, look, this other brand did it and like it paid off for them. So it's like, this isn't so far out of the realm of possibility. Because I do think, yeah, brands are sometimes tentative to step outside of the kind of traditional commercial space, especially into animation. But because brand storytelling showcased an animated brand film, I could point to that in all my conversations and be like, look, like, look what happened with Affleck. They had this amazing, beautiful film. You can do the same thing with us. Like, we've already made the animatic, like, work's almost done. So just come on board. So yeah, so shout out to brand storytelling for that. That really also put wind in our sails. And then in terms of sort of next steps, yeah, we're trying to qualify for the Oscars. We believe in this film, and Kawaii's been sort of a great partner in that they've put no demands on us in terms of we need to have this online in Q1 2023. They're like, what works best for you guys? And they're on board for the Oscar push. Because again, if that were to happen, and obviously that's a long shot, but if that were to happen, that only adds eyeballs to the film, only gives great publicity to the brand. And there's been examples of that as well in the past, like Dove's relationship with the film Hair Love. Like, you see that making art can benefit the brand. You don't have to make a commercial.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I mean,
Amen.
yeah, amen. For those of you who don't know, also, like, this Academy qualifying trajectory for shorts is an amazing. I'm so psyched to hear that you guys are doing that, because you basically apply to film festivals that can automatically, if you get in and get an award, it could automatically put you in contention for an Oscar. And then you can get a short list, which is like usually around 15 shorts. So even if you just get on the short list and don't get a nomination, it's a huge amount of press for the brand, for the filmmakers, for the film. And then if you get a nomination, again, a huge amount of press. And then, if you're so lucky to get the gold, I mean, it's just an amazing trajectory. And so how, like, did you have to explain to Kawaii that this is a trajectory? Did they know already? And how did they, were they surprised that, like, this little film that they were getting involved with was going to go for it, or what?
Well, I think first they were just surprised that this little film was made. I think it took, it was basically from when we started to when we finished, and we're still tinkering. Like, just yesterday, we were in the studio perfecting the sound mix. So it's like, we started this back in April of 2020, and here we are in November 2022, and we're kind of at the end of the road, but we're still tinkering. I think for them, because Kawaii got involved early, so it's been almost a year and a half, I would say, since they really came to the table. And so for them, I think, I cynically think they took a shot with us, but I don't know if they ever thought it was going to pan out one way or the other. And so I think for them to actually see the finished film after all this time and be like, wow, this actually turned out really great. And oh, wow, it's going to be in this competition at Brand Storytelling. This is amazing. They, at that point, I think they were in with us. They've given us such goodwill up to this point that I think they weren't familiar with the Oscar sort of path or what that would look like. But they were like, if that's what you guys want to do, we're on board for that. And we think, it'll pay off for us as well. So,
and
again,
yeah,
they've been great.
Yeah. And speaking of them being great, like I was saying before, like, I don't know if I said this the way that I wanted to, and I still might not again, but when they let us do what we want to do without all these stipulations, they get a better product. And we appreciate that more from them. The more freedom we get, the more we love you. So, I really do, because honestly, like, I was hesitant to make this like a brand thing. When John Henry presented it to me before I had seen Hair Love and the Affleck film and all these other ones, I thought maybe it was cheesy or tacky, right? But I feel like the exact opposite now, because if you find these cool brands that are down to support artists, that's cool, because they frankly have more money than, an independent filmmaker. And like, we're going to appreciate that, because we get told no a lot. We get rejected plenty of times. It's not a big deal. It happens to all of us. But for the ones that are just like, yeah, what do you like? This is cool. This is outside of the box. What do you need? I'm just like, what do you need? Like, thank you for like replying. You know what I mean? So I really appreciate that from Kawaii, and I don't know. I look forward to doing more of this in the future.
No, that's a great, I mean, that just dovetails totally with what I was going to ask you next, which is how can brands be better partners and more support and get more out of it for filmmakers. And I agree with you completely, because you can point to brand films often that don't have that haven't given the creative leeway, and haven't given, the trust hasn't been there between the filmmaker and the brand, or the filmmaker and the studio. You see it on Netflix all the time or wherever else. Like, there's plenty of films that you could see where it went wrong, but there's also so many where you could see where it went right. And I think that's what was so interesting to watch all the films that were put out here, is really dissect the relationship between the brand and the filmmakers when it goes right. So what do you guys think, being in the filmmaker seat, brands can do well, and how can they make successful art with filmmakers?
Well, I think the first thing they can do is at least humor any sort of inbound emails or things that they get. Not everything can be retrofitted to be a brand film. I don't think that's the case. But I think, like with our film, for example, we could make our story, put a logo on the piano, and not change sort of the fabric of the film. So it's like it worked out for Kawaii because they took a chance with us. So I think the first thing is just like, if a filmmaker reaches out to you, and you like it, really consider it. Don't just say, oh, this isn't coming from a big agency. This isn't coming from us internally. It's like, take the shot or take a chance. And look, maybe you don't end up doing it, but at least I would say treat it with some level of respect in the way that you might with an internal idea that then you're sending outbound. And then I think it's, internally, when you're coming up with your campaigns, I think anymore, most people, at least younger people, aren't really watching commercials traditionally. I think, if I see something on YouTube with ads, I'm like waiting to skip ad. If I can't skip the ad, I'm opening another tab and doing something for 20 seconds. Like, I'm not watching commercials. Also, I feel like commercials typically, unless they're really amazing, they sort of have a limited shelf life. And so, whereas a film can have an eternal shelf life in a way, because if it's not about the latest model car or this specific piano, and it's a story that connects to humans, people can return to that story 10 years from now and still get something out of it in the way that they might not with a very specific brand focused commercial. And then in terms of the actual like interpersonal relationship with filmmakers, I just feel like, brands have to protect their brand. So I don't necessarily expect every brand to be totally hands off, like, yeah, do whatever you want. But I think there always has to be a conversation about the creative focus of the story. Because what I think you want to avoid is having, like, we have this great heartfelt story, but then feeling like we really need to hammer home the brand more. Like, that's where I feel like you start to go wrong, because you'll have a great film, but then all of a sudden there's like a close-up of a beer bottle, or like you're like zooming in on stuff that like you wouldn't in a traditional narrative film. And people see through that. And I think that cheapens in a way the sort of the illusion of the film. And so I think it's kind of realizing that, hey, maybe we should at least listen to these filmmakers. And if they're very vehemently opposed to one of our notes, let's have a dialogue about it and maybe find a compromise, or maybe say, oh, actually, filmmaker, you're correct.
I want to say one more thing to that, kind of the way that John Henry was saying that companies should be more responsive inbound from creatives. I also think, in the way that John Henry convinced me of this, I think creatives should also be more open to partnering with a brand if it is an organic fit, and not just saying, oh no, I'm too cool for that. I'm too cool for school. It's like, no, if this can help you get your film made, and this can elevate you as an artist, and it's not compromising anything about you, why not? Like, this can be a very symbiotic relationship. And so I just wanted to add that too, like on top of companies being more open-minded, artists be more open-minded, and you know, keep pounding the pavement.
Yeah, that is such a good point. I mean, the fact all of those are great points. We all have to learn to work together, and like the art is so elevated when you do. So I mean, which you could see by your amazing film and many others here. What else should I ask you guys? What did I miss?
I don't know. I think like in our conversation, you know, earlier we talked about, or like I brought up this whole thing of like, you know, brands can build this kind of almost karmic goodwill by working with artists. Because again, in America, we don't have really the big government sponsored arts programs that you have in Europe and other countries. And so if you're a scrappy young filmmaker trying to especially work in animation, which is an expensive medium, you really do face an uphill battle if you can't get support from either an institution or from a brand. And I think, you know, people gravitate towards animated films. You see on YouTube that they all have tons of views, millions of views. And I think because we don't have these sort of watery funds here in the States, brands can fill that hole. Basically, they can play that role. They can, you know, devote especially if you're a big brand, a very small percentage of your marketing spend towards helping filmmakers. And I really think that will pay huge dividends for you down the road if you're a brand. Because again, not only will you enhance that filmmaker's life, you'll enhance all the people that are working on the film. I think a lot of times people forget that these films are made by people, and they're made by large teams of people. And so if you can actually have a budget to sustain your film, you're not only making the film, but you're sustaining the lives of the people that are working on this film with you. And if the brand is the one that's ultimately paying that bill, all those people will have goodwill towards that brand. Really, at the end of the day, even if they're not super conscious of it, it's because this brand is allowing them to, you know, work on their craft, create great art, live their life, and not be so stressed about money. So like you build that goodwill, and that translates, you know, even just word of mouth. It's like now I tell everyone about Kawaii. Whereas before we started this film, I knew of them, but I had no connection to them. Now I actually feel an emotional connection to them.
100%. I mean, that's been my experience with United States Postal Service on Dear Santa. We've hired probably more than 100 people to work on the film and the series for them over the last several years. And it's meaningful to all those families, especially during the pandemic, but always. And it gives tons of goodwill. And I agree with you fully. So yeah, pick up the phone, brands, when we call. That's you know, we're good at cold calling, and we're persistent. And I think, you know, these passion projects will get done one way or the other. So, you know, it's good to jump on board them. Let me just finish it by saying, like, everybody needs to see this film. I cannot wait till it's in the Oscars. I am just so excited about that. It's just so brilliant. And I love it so much. And really, congratulations on you guys for making such an amazing film.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.